Hey, I'm James. I'm currently an entrepreneur and I attend Cornerstone Boston. I've been attending since 2009, so going on about 9 years right now. Some of my hobbies, I love spending time with my girlfriend and just hanging out with her. I love playing sports. That's pretty much how I spend my free time these days. Any celebrity actor? Oh man. I gotta say, I respect Will Smith. He started his career as a rapper, and then he adapted into having his own little show as Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And then he was able to transition and rebrand himself to being like a movie star in action movies and dramas. And so he was able to continue learning and grow throughout the whole process. So, I gotta respect that. Growing up, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to be a business owner or own my own company some way. But I didn't go down that path, or at least I didn't start that path initially, because my parents, who immigrated from Korea, they saw how hard it was to be business owners, and they wanted me to be, they wanted me to go down a path where it would be a lot more stable. And so to get an education, get my degree from college, and then go into a company and get a high-paying job. And so that's what I did initially. And what's been one of the hardest struggles or challenges that God's been teaching me? Throughout my whole life, I think He's been asking me at the core of everything this one very particular question. And that's, do you trust me? And so my whole journey was learning to surrender and learning to trust God and Christ. And so I got saved when I was 13. And like I said before, I knew I wanted to go into business. But for one reason or another, whether it was fear of what my parents would think or fear of maybe not being good enough to make it in that way, I went a different way. And so I went through school, I went to college, and I got my degree. And I think it was in college that I had my first very big failure, something that even to this day I have a little bit of regret. And that's because I spent a lot of my time in college not doing the best that I could academically. It wasn't because I wasn't good enough to excel. It wasn't because I didn't have the skills or the intelligence, or because I was incompetent. It wasn't even because I didn't really have the drive. It really came down to something that started when I was 10. And at that time, it was the onset of something called Tourette's that came into my life. And if for those that don't know what it is, it's basically motor and vocal tics. And in college is when that just started to eat away at my security. And it was very, very hard to face the world and even just go to class. And to no fault of anyone's. It wasn't like people were teasing me. It wasn't like people were giving me a hard time necessarily. It was just all internal and within myself. And and up until that point, I excelled at school. But it was during my time at college that I just couldn't overcome that challenge. And yeah, so I remember having all these dreams and aspirations, but graduating with a 2.59 GPA and trying to make it in the world. And that was also at a time where it was at the height of the recession. And so when I first got my job moving to Boston, working in corporate finance, I was at a place where what normally would take a year to transition from an entry level to a senior and then another year to a manager, it took 4 years because we were at the height of the recession and there was a hiring and promotional freeze. And And so all these dreams and aspirations and believing that I can do so much more, but feeling stuck at a dead-end job that's not challenging enough and that's very disengaging was very, very hard. But at that time, it was also where I started to build my resilience and drive and hunger to break into something greater. And so I spent the bulk of my time trying to figure out how to redirect my career. And after many attempts, I finally broke into the consulting industry, and I started my career in management consulting. And I won't forget it. I remember my parents saying, "We're really proud of you. Now, our son has made it," and that made me feel really good. It did, and I started to believe that I made it too. Little did I know, a year into it, or not even a year into it, God would convict me so strongly to leave that all behind and go to seminary. And I can't forget that day when that just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I just remember weeping at my desk. This is while I'm doing work, and and I just remember thinking, man, this is something that I can't deny. This is so crystal clear that he just wants me to go to seminary, and I didn't know for what. I didn't know why he wanted me to go. I just knew I had to go, and I just knew that I had to be in ministry of some sort. And that started many conversations with my parents. That wasn't very easy at that time. And they're God-fearing, church-going parents, and they, even with all that, they found it hard to support me initially. But over time of praying through it, talking more about it, and getting the counsel of my friends and close pastors in my life, we decided it was the right move to make. But even then, the hardest thing to let go of at that time was this. I'm an only child, and my parents have sacrificed so much of their time, of their years, of their energy, of their money to support me so that I could succeed. And all I wanted to do was pay that back. I wanted to be able to help them retire early. I wanted to be able to take care of them financially. And I knew that letting go of my current career track at that time and going to seminary meant that I probably had to let go of all those aspirations too. And I remember praying through it. And this is what God told me. He said, "James, I know you love your parents. Don't forget, I love them much more than you do. And James, I know you want to take care of your parents. But I could take care of them, even in practical ways, better than you can." And he said, "Whether you take care of them or not, it's because I allowed you to. And even if you don't, I will. Whether it's through you or through other means." And so I said, "All right, how am I gonna respond to that?" I said, "I'll go." And this is where I started my seminary journey. And at that time, in my limited knowledge of what ministry meant, I thought that it was going to boil down to either being a missionary or a pastor. And I knew I didn't want to be a missionary, and so I figured, all right, by default, that means I'm probably going to be a pastor. But when I went to seminary, I learned that ministry is so much more than being a missionary or a pastor. It's not just reserved for those within the church. It's a calling for all Christians and believers of Christ to partake in the ministry in their respective fields of reconciling people to each other and to God. And that's what I learned. And the pivotal moment was when I was trying so hard to get into this preaching class. And I remember being the first student in the wait list because it was booked. It was full. And I remember thinking, if I just go diligently for 2 weeks, every class, maybe he'll let me in. And so 2 weeks later, the professor says, all right, I have to make a decision. I'm going to pray about it. And then I'll let you know the next day. And so I go home feeling pretty good. He's going to pray about it. I want to be in a class about preaching. Why wouldn't he let me in, right? So the next day he comes and he says, James, I can't let you in. And by the grace of God, I had enrolled in another class as a backup called Business Ethics. And I honestly didn't want to take that class because I already fulfilled my ethics requirement and I wanted to save my electives for other things. But that's where I met the professor that changed the trajectory of my path during my time at seminary, and his name is Dr. David Gill. And he just showed me a new world where God had this particular design of what business should be and how it should be run and what the workplace culture should be like, which is so different from how this world views it. And I just felt like, man, this is what it's about. It just lit this fire in my heart that I couldn't shake. And so I started reading all these books and listening to these executives and leaders and people in the workplace that are doing the exact thing that I wanted to do. And it just got me really excited. And so that's what I focused on learning: workplace leadership and ethics. And then 2 weeks before my graduation, I get hit with this devastating news that I'm diagnosed with cancer. And I remember everything just coming to a halt. And everything I've worked for and the journey that I've been on that whole time, I just remember being confused. Like, what was it all for? And I remember thinking, this couldn't be it. This can't be it. You know, when I went to seminary, I remember thinking, okay, this is me surrendering my career to God. And now, when I come upon this challenge, I remember being faced with another question. The same question that he's been asking me every single time in my life when I come across something, a crossroad, or something that doesn't make sense. And he says, James, do you trust me? And with the support of Kelsey and my parents and the community, I just felt so empowered. And I remember just telling God, yeah, I completely trust you. And what the enemy wanted to use to devastate me became the platform for me to be even louder about glorifying God and praising Him. And nothing, not even cancer, could stop that. And I just remember having this divine peace and comfort and strength that transcends all understanding, just guarding my heart. And I just remember being very, very grateful. And this was 2 weeks before my graduation. And then after I graduated, I remember going on another challenging journey of about a year to a year and a half of unemployment. And during that time, God just closed every single door, every door that I tried to knock on, because He had other plans. He didn't want me to go to corporate. He didn't want me to go into another company. Instead, the job that He brought me was a minimum wage job at a fast food restaurant. And I remember thinking, man, this can't be it. But it was. And it comes back to that question again. Do you trust me? And I remember Him telling me that He would bring me a job, and if that's the door that He opened, then that's the door that I'll take. And that's what I ended up doing. Or what I ended up doing. And that's where I met my current co-founder for the company that I've been working on, Will, and he and I have been working on building up Perilas together and trying to get it up and running. But during that time, I remember just having to learn everything from the ground up for the past year. And that's where it brings me to right now, another crossroad of God just convicting me again and asking me, are you ready to take the leap and let go of the time that you were working there where you could make an income, a steady income, and go into the uncertainty of working fully on building this business up, this vision that I've given you and placed on your heart, even if it doesn't make sense through logical logical lenses. Do you trust me enough to let go and take the plunge? And I do. So the vision that God's given me, it's part of our vision statement for Perilas, and it really comes down to valuing people. And so we believe that people have dignity and worth, and we believe that treating them in that way and focusing on people over profits primarily creates more value for everyone involved. And we want to do it through providing Korean food in a fast and convenient way in Boston. For me personally, the calling and purpose that I have, and it took so long to realize this, it took nearly 34 years for me to know this, is to inspire people. God's brought me through so many challenges, and He's been faithful so many times that it's just built this unbreakable trust between me and Him. And I find myself realizing that it's just this glorious freedom that I have when I surrender it all to Christ. Someone that is able and willing to provide and be faithful beyond my wildest imaginations. And I believe that it's my duty to share His faithfulness throughout all my challenges, and to speak with the passion and fire and authenticity to people that may be going through something that's difficult to overcome, and be inspired by His faithfulness in my life, because it's the same God that provides the same deliverance for others as He did to me. And that's where I feel like He's leading me right now. I want to create an example or a case study. I just want the world to be able to see whatever business or venture that I go on, and to know that you can value people. You can treat people with dignity and respect. You can elevate them and not use them as a means to an end to make more money and still be wildly successful. That's the greater vision that I have for Perilas and any vision or any business that I go into.